The Trump and Powell debacle will not stop. This political theater, you honestly cannot make it up, folks, because this is something that I don't think we've ever seen before. And it seems like every single day that passes, the drama keeps increasing. So, what would this mean if Donald Trump decides to fire Jerome Powell? And what would that mean for interest rates, the overall economy, and much, much more? But let's dive in to what would actually happen. And is this actually happening? Is Donald Trump going to fire Jerome Powell? It would be a, quote, mess. The new research gaming out of the possible scenarios if Donnie T would fire the Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warns it would be significantly negative for markets, which I think is very interesting because the narrative around all of this is that Donald Trump's going to cut interest rates immediately. He's going to get somebody in there right away. But is it too much power to have the president now step in and intervene into the Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be away from politics? Would this set a terrible precedent here going forward? I think that's a real question that we should ask here. And they research and speculate that the Supreme Court could ultimately decide whether Trump has the power to fire Powell, excuse me. And Trump said he was highly unlikely to fire Powell shortly after a senior White House official said that the Fed chair was likely to be fired soon. But that we expect, as everybody does, that it would be significantly negative for markets, likely driving both an equity sell-off and a counterproductive spike in long-term yields. So, but Trump says he's not planning on doing it, right? But would Jerome Powell firing, would that get Trump what he really wants? And what he really wants is interest rates, right? So if we look at Trump firing Jerome Powell odds on Polymarket, I think we've seen something that's pretty interesting here. We've seen it increase here lately. We've seen this start to spike up slightly. So Trump firing Jerome Powell, will he be out before June? Seems like, or not before June. Obviously, that's not going to happen because we're in July at this point. But will Trump fire Jerome Powell by August 31st? That's another one that we see on Polymarket. Look, it's low percentage chance, 18 and 31% chance. But will he get what he wants, which is lower interest rates? The president has only himself to blame for the interest rates being where yours are. Does he really? You're fired, right? They're saying that the reason why Trump has low interest rates or wants these low interest rates and he has high interest rates is because he had them as low previously. But I don't really necessarily think it's the case, right? When we see the amount of money printed in 2020 and you see the global M2 money supply absolutely explode here, that was after Donald Trump. You know, what we saw here, the global M2 money supply start to skyrocket here. This was Trump, or this was not Trump. This 4-year period, seeing it skyrocket up, that was not Donald Trump. That was when Joe Biden was in office. So Powell is now being put to the test and essentially defending the Fed's renovation in a point-by-point response, Trump here. So the annoying part for, I think, Jerome Powell and all of this is that this now political theater, he has to reply to it. He has to respond to everything that we see here. He has to respond to what Donald Trump is saying. The Fed, as Dub is saying in the chat down under Blues, what's going on? He said the Fed is so corrupt, money supply and spending causes inflation. Exactly, right? But we're seeing two different kind of sides of the coin here. We're seeing interest rates being held very high and Jerome Powell essentially looking at all of this, right? Like, hey, we need to keep interest rates high, but the government is going to spend more in interest payments if they keep interest rates high, which is the reason why Trump wants to lower them. Now, the president is extremely troubled by your management of the Federal Reserve system, right? So Powell has had to respond. He said in response late Thursday that the Fed is not generally subjected to the direction of the National Capital Planning Commission, a body that oversees and constructs projects for the federal government. Powell said that we have taken great care to ensure that the project is carefully overseen since it was first approved by the board in 2017. But the big, beautiful bill has passed, which is going to increase government spending, right? So Trump has started the Doge, right? Which everybody thinks has been a net positive, right? You eliminate a lot of the fluff. But on the flip side of the coin, he wants this big, beautiful bill to increase government spending. So it's all the same, essentially, right? And at a certain point, they are looking at the big, beautiful bill, build back better, all of these BBBs. Something isn't lining up here. Why are they using that? With Congress approving President Trump's sweeping one big, beautiful bill ahead of Independence Day, U.S. retailers are voicing strong support for the legislature's pro-growth measures, right? That's what they're doing, this illusion here. It's pro-growth. We want to increase government spending because it'll help grow the economy more. We all know that that's not really the case, right? GDP, one of the biggest metrics in GDP is government spending. So if the government just spends on bull, then it looks like GDP is increasing. That's why we've seen GDP crash lately, because Doge essentially eliminated a lot of the miscellaneous spending. So when you see Doge eliminate the miscellaneous spending, you see all these things happen. Well, hey, now look at it. Government spending down. Oh, GDP's crashing. What's going on? It's not looking great. Dub is saying it depends what the money is spent on. Sometimes spending creates revenue, which is true, right? Sometimes they are useful. Sometimes it does help. But it's interesting that you have the U.S. Director of Federal Housing, Bill Plute, coming out and saying that they're looking at a criminal referral from Congress for Jerome Powell. Like, these headlines are absolutely insane. They're saying that Jerome Powell keeping interest rates high like he has is criminal, and that they are looking at these policies and saying it is a huge detriment. And even with that, there's still just a 2.6% chance that the Fed cuts interest rates here in about 13 days. So in less than 2 weeks, we're going to see this. And Jerome Powell, is he going to cut? Is he not going to? It looks like they're not going to cut interest rates in the near term. And how is the dollar reacting to all of this? Well, the dollar is still just at 98.6, right? And so when I started doing these live streams, for those of you guys in the chat, those of you guys that are subscribed, I know 90% of you guys that watch this channel are not subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button with the bell notification so you know when I'm going live, and you could join Dub in the chat, because 98.6 is about mid-tier from when I started doing this. With the lowest we saw was around 97. Right? The lowest we saw was right here, just under 97, 96 earlier this month. Right? So we've seen the Dixie, the strength of the dollar, fall to lows that we've never seen. The dollar has seen the worst start to a year in the past decade, 2 decades, 20 years, since 2008. You haven't seen a start to the dollar this poor. And so with that, the S&P 500 sitting at $6,297, nearing its all-time high. Now, with this, with Trump essentially at odds with Jerome Powell, does this really seem like a healthy economy and healthy market? You got to ask yourself that question, because it seems like there's a lot of issues here. Right? There's a lot of issues underneath the hood. When there's issues underneath the hood, you're not going to make any drastic changes. But there's issues underneath the hood. And then on top of it, you're seeing the economy pump. So it really makes you think with all of this, right? Why is the economy pumping when there's definite issues here? Well, it's because inflation is not under wraps. Dub is saying Trump is a builder and a businessman investor. He's not a spender of other people's money. He's going to want a return on the investment. Exactly. I agree with that. And that's why I think the tariffs are going to be interesting, right? We're going to be tracking that here this entire time. Everybody's been blaming tariffs as the cause of inflation. The reality is it's the money printing. You guys know. You guys know who have been coming here. Like, you don't see things like that. They literally highlighted this specific area right here in 2020 because they're like, this is out of the ordinary. The only other places they highlighted was during the dot-com boom in 2000 and in 2008. So you got to ask yourself, why are they doing all that, right? Well, it's because of that massive amounts of money printing and what we're going to see here going forward. Now, this whole debacle is going to get juicier and juicier, and I'm going to be tracking this very closely as we're starting to see this rise up here, right? We're seeing the odds of Jerome Powell getting shit canned here rise up here pretty quickly. So we've also seen this, right? 34% chance will Trump remove Jerome Powell in 2025. I mean, we saw that skyrocket up here today or the other day. So I think that we need to be keeping a close eye on this, as this can drastically change the overall monetary policy and much more than that. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button, hitting that like button, telling a friend to tell a friend, and changing the subject to the Bitcoin CEO raising the price. Maybe we'll talk about that again tomorrow on the Green Candle channel. So be sure to go subscribe there as well. And I will catch you guys all at the next one.